Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. So today, I'd like to do another entry in the movie Spotlight series, and I would like to spotlight a particularly good slasher from the early '80s that kind of apes a bit off of Friday the 13th, and that is 1981's The Prowler. Now, this slasher, again, it came out right on the heels of the first Friday the 13th, and the early '80s slasher trend was really kicking in around 1981. Again, you had films like Friday the 13th Part 2. You had films like The Prowler and The Burning, and, there were a bunch of other ones that had come out around that time as well. Sleepaway Camp, I think, might have been the next year. So this movie was kind of one of the ones that it got overlooked, but not necessarily by the wrong people. Now, this film is directed by Joe Zito, who would go on to direct Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, or Friday the 13th Part 4, whatever you want to classify it as. And it was really because of this movie, because the producer, who was over at, I believe, Paramount at the time, uh, stated that he loved The Prowler, but the fact of the matter was that it wasn't going to make any money. Now, if you slapped the Friday the 13th name on that film, then it would make money. Which is not a very subtle hint, hint, nudge, nudge that Paramount wanted Joe Zito over to make one of those films. So there again, there's a good pedigree here, and I really do enjoy the Prowler. The kills are very original, especially for the time. Again, this movie predates a lot of films where you see people killed with certain things. There's a great one with there's a few great ones. There's one of them that's very very good with a pitchfork and a bunch of other stuff, and the stuff at the end too with the killer is great as well. And of course, the great Tom Savini also did this film. For whatever reason, I guess he was doing Friday the 13th Part 2 and this movie in 1981. Um, but Savini again was still very much in his element, and you can tell the special effects again are first rate for a horror film. The practicals are really good. The stuff that they do, the special effects sell it. They sell it very well. And that's really, the crux of the movie. The characters, for the most part, again, it's kind of like Friday the 13th, where a lot of them are essentially cannon fodder. There's a few that do stand out as you watch the film, but, you know, ultimately, if you are a slasher fan, if you really do enjoy slashers as much as I do, then you will love this movie. You will love The Prowler. Again, the kills alone are enough to get a slasher fan invested in this movie. Now, if you're a more casual horror fan, yeah, you're probably not going to like this. It's going to be like something you've seen before. Again, for slasher people, for people that really like slasher movies, it's going to be an interesting new little experience. And again, you get kind of the behind the scenes stuff where Joe Zito, again, would go on to direct Friday the 13th Part 4. So if you like Friday the 13th, the final chapter, then you'll probably like this movie. Um, and again, this is when Joe Zito was in his early stage before he entered into action movies like Missing in Action. But uh, this is really it was an underrated slasher at the time. Again, 1981 was chock full of these things. So this mostly got swept under the rug, unfortunately. But it has had a life underground. It's essentially, it's garnered a cult following. Um, if you're into horror, you've probably heard of it or seen it. But for those people that haven't really aren't really in touch with the '80s horror and stuff like that, you might not know about it. So I always like highlighting movies like this because there's so much detail that's put into the film from both the director and the special effects artists, and even the actors, even though some of them do lack a little bit. But it's nice to see these types of films just because you know you think like, oh, I've watched Friday the 13th, I've watched Halloween, I've watched Nightmare on Elm Street, I've seen all the '80s has to offer. No, there are a ton of just little gems from the '70s and the '80s in terms of horror. Before horror kind of hit the wall a little bit in the '90s. But again, this is one of those films. I like to put these on the spotlight. I'll probably do a fair amount more of them as well. But uh, you know, look up The Prowler. Again, it's an interesting movie. I don't know if you can rent it currently off of any subscription services. I got my copy on DVD. Again, you really don't see it on television at all either. They'd have to edit out most of the good stuff anyway. But uh, that's just a short spotlight on that film. So, put in the comments any of your thoughts. Would you like to see this film? Are you a slasher fan? Where have you seen the movie? Um, and remember to hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?